Yeah.
And you could see it in carried out in our media, our corporate media, our legacy media over this last year. There have been numerous studies that have done that show that type of bias in language, that the language used towards Israelis is much more accommodating, much more
Compassionate.
compassionate, exactly, and it personifies them. And when it speaks of an action by the Palestinians, it's a slaughter or it's a massacre. I mean, and then
Horrific.
when it's the Palestinians being killed, it's very cold, it's very passive. And there's I think one of the best examples is that CNN for many months had this policy. They may still do, as far as I know. I don't watch CNN really, but they had this policy. First of all, CNN ran all their things through the military censor in Jerusalem. As far as I know, they're still doing that. But as these bombs were being dropped all through Gaza, and people just massacred and murdered in the dozens and hundreds,
Hmm.
um, CNN would not say that Israel did it.
Right.
Until the Israelis confirmed that they themselves dropped the bomb, they would just say a blast happened. An
Yeah.
explosion
Right.
happened in Jabalia refugee camp
Right.
and killed 25 people. They,
Right.
they, they just leave it like as this nebulous, and you still see that in
Uh-huh.
headlines all the time. Palestinians, 25 Palestinians die. It doesn't
Uh-huh.
say Israel killed them. I mean, so you see just even with
Uh-huh.
that use of passive language, but then of course uh, uh, the way the machine goes into overdrive after October 7th and all
Yeah.
the lurid and horrid stories that come out of October 7th. October 7th, certainly there were plenty of atrocities. Nothing needed to be made up, but they made up a lot of things to really ensure that the story was there and to provide that really get into that aspect that these people are the other. These people are unhuman, that these people are not like us. We would never do this. These people will cut off the heads of babies, type of things. And those
Yeah.
stories were all lies. But
Manufacturing consent for genocide.
exactly. That's exactly what was doing, Harvey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see it cracking with young journalists and educators and academics like you are, and say the gray zone, and even Judge is he's younger than Harvey and I, at least. So, um,
Yeah, and I like being put in that. I'm 51, so I like being put in that young category. I appreciate that. Yeah, it is. It totally is. I mean, just for one thing, look at the polling numbers, right? Look at the polling numbers in terms of public opinion, support for Israel. I mean, a majority since November have supported the ceasefire. Up throughout this entire year, a plurality of Republicans have supported a ceasefire. A plurality of Republicans now support some type of arms embargo or conditioning aid to Israel in order to get a ceasefire. For independents and Democrats, it's overwhelming the numbers.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's been for the entire year. The numbers have only grown in favor of the Palestinians and against Israel, if you just want to put it in that, break it out like that. And you look at that, right, guys, and you say, how is that possible?
Yeah.
With the fact that our politicians, nearly all of our politicians, and most of our corporate media are just essentially repeating Israeli talking points. And you
Yeah.
have to look at our independent media. You have to look at, whether it's like this type of work, the fact that we're able to do this on Zoom and record it, and you're able to get this out to people. I mean, the people like Judge Napolitano, people like you mentioned, the Gray Zone, Max Blumenthal, and Aaron Mate, and Aaron Parampal, and all the great folks that they have there. Jeremy Lafredo, who was with them in Israel, who just got arrested by the Israelis, who's, I guess, now free, but is waiting trial, I think, for
Yeah.
doing nothing more than upsetting them because the information
Yeah.
he disseminated was information that was already in the public. So you could see, and I guess the best example of all this of how dangerous this ability for people to communicate and inform and organize and mobilize, et cetera, is the fact that we've got the U.S. government wants to ban TikTok.
Yeah.
We look at this and you say, how is it possible that, the American public is in favor of Palestine as opposed to Israel? after all these decades of what we just described, of this really deliberate and effective and incredibly well-resourced campaign to ensure America's always siding with Israel. And you have to understand it is because of this type of technology we have, because of this independent media we have, this alternative media, if you want to call it that. And it allows people to understand what's going on there, whether it's because every Palestinian in Gaza has a cell phone and they're able to record all these things.
Yeah.
It's also because we're able all to watch it and we're able to share it. And this is a real threat to the empire, to the powers that be. And we see this continual process of trying to, nothing you can do, I think, about stopping people from taking photos and videos and from making content, but they can do a lot to limit the distribution. And I think that's the big fight for us going forward is how do we distribute this? How do we get this information out to people? Because there will be a crackdown on it. And we're going to have to find a way because that's always what happens. There will be an attempt to squelch that distribution because the information is seen as dangerous. And the reality is that the technology companies they're under a tremendous strain on this because they don't want to lose their user base. They don't want to lose the revenue they get from all these younger people who are understanding what's occurring in Palestine as a genocide. At the same time, too, the technology companies are part of the elite of the empire now. They're just the same as the military-industrial complex, the banks, the fossil fuel companies, the traditional media, et cetera. The technology companies are there. And, so they have this strain. And, of course, what they will do eventually, because we've seen this, we've seen the threats come from the Harris campaign, right? We've seen the threats come from the Democrats. We know the threats from the Republicans are there as well, that they will go after the technology companies if the technology companies continue to allow this type of information, this truth to be dispersed. And so that's the big fight I see coming ahead for us.